In the sleepy town of Larksville, North Carolina, where the morning air still carries the scent of honeysuckle and silence is broken only by birdsong, lived a little girl who saw the world in a way no one else could. Emily Grace Carter, just 8 years old, sat by the same window each morning, humming soft melodies that drifted beyond the lace curtains. Though her eyes had never opened to the sight of trees or sky, Emily's world was far from dark. It was colored by sound, memory, and feeling. The rhythm of footsteps, the hush of wind through the grass, the rumble of her father's old truck. Each sound painted pictures in her mind, clearer than any canvas ever could. Emily's father, Daniel Carter, was a quiet man, with rough hands and gentle eyes. He worked long hours as a local mechanic, raising Emily alone since the day she was born. Her mother, Madeline, had passed during childbirth, a sacrifice Daniel never spoke of, but carried in his silence. He never remarried. His life revolved around Emily, the way she tilted her head when listening to music, how her small fingers danced along the piano keys in their living room, and the soft lullabies she sang to herself before bed. Though Emily couldn't see the world, her father made sure she never felt its absence. To most people, Emily was just a quiet child with a white cane and an old soul. She didn't have many friends. Kids her age didn't know how to talk to her. But Emily didn't mind. In fact, her happiest moments came when she was alone with sound. She loved the rain tapping on the roof, the faraway call of the train at dusk, the way her father's voice changed when he read her stories at night. But most of all, she loved music. Not the kind blasted through speakers or taught with scales, but music that came from feeling, from silence, from within. Every Sunday she attended church with her father. She didn't sit in the front pews or stand on stage. Instead, she sat quietly in the back row, humming along with the hymns, blending her voice into the background, like a soft harmony no one noticed, but one that made the whole song feel complete. Emily never asked to sing solo, never sought applause. She sang because it made her feel alive. Her voice wasn't trained or flashy, it was honest, and in its honesty there was something unforgettable. But one Sunday morning, everything quietly shifted. The church soloist was late, and in a whisper of courage, Emily had stepped forward when asked. No microphone, no rehearsal, just her small frame standing near the pulpit, singing "You Are My Sunshine" in a voice so delicate and sincere it left the room breathless. Unbeknownst to her, Mrs. Kendall, her Sunday school teacher, had recorded the moment on her phone. She didn't think twice before uploading it online later that evening, thinking perhaps a few local parents might enjoy it. She had no idea she was releasing something far more powerful than a simple church performance. Within 24 hours, the video quietly began to ripple across the internet. Strangers commented on the purity of the child's voice, the emotion behind each note, and how her blindness seemed irrelevant compared to the light she carried. Emily, of course, didn't know. She continued her week as always, folding laundry with her father, practicing scales on their old upright piano, and sipping cocoa at night while he read aloud. But somewhere far beyond her quiet life, the world had started listening. 3 days later, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the quiet of the Carter household was interrupted by a sharp ring. Daniel was in the kitchen drying dishes while Emily played a soft melody on the piano. He glanced at the caller ID, unfamiliar with the number, but answered anyway. The voice on the other end was brisk but friendly. "Mr. Carter, this is Ryan Matthews, talent coordinator at America's Spotlight. We just watched a video of your daughter singing in church, and we'd like to invite her to perform on national television." Daniel froze. For a second he thought it was a prank, but the man's tone was too professional, too confident to be joking. In the living room, Emily had stopped playing. She turned her head slightly, sensing a shift in her father's breathing. When Daniel finally ended the call and sat down beside her, he hesitated before speaking. He said slowly, "someone saw your video online. A show called America's Spotlight. They want you to sing on TV." Emily's lips parted slightly. Her hands clutched her skirt. She didn't fully understand what it meant, but something in her heart stirred, something between fear and wonder. Her father continued. "They said they'd fly us to Los Angeles. Everything paid for, just one song." Daniel wasn't convinced. He had grown up watching shows like this, bright lights, edited emotions, and people turned into stories for ratings. His daughter, vulnerable and precious, didn't belong in a world that chewed people up for entertainment. He pictured her standing alone on a stage, blinded by spotlights, surrounded by strangers. They just want a sympathy act, he muttered to himself, not realizing Emily had heard. She reached for his hand and whispered, "I want to try Daddy. I want them to hear me, really hear me." Her words were simple, but her tone was steady. And in that moment, Daniel saw not just a child, but a young girl with an old heart asking for a chance. What Ryan Matthews didn't say on the call was that Emily's file had already been marked. In the industry, they called it an SE sympathetic elimination. A contestant brought in to touch hearts, generate tears, and be quietly dismissed in the first round. It was a formula, but what they hadn't anticipated was Emily's quiet determination or Daniel's fierce love. That night, Daniel stayed up late, researching everything he could. He watched past episodes, studied how children were treated, noted every pattern. Then he looked at his daughter, humming herself to sleep, and made a decision. The next morning, Daniel called back. "We'll do it," he said firmly, "but I'll be by her side every step of the way." The assistant on the other line confirmed the flight hotel and schedule. Emily was going to Los Angeles. It would be her first time on a plane. She asked if they could bring her music notebook, the one where she had scribbled lyrics and braille notes for years. "And my sunshine bear," she added, referring to her late mother's stuffed toy that she still hugged at night. Daniel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. As they packed for the trip, neither of them knew exactly what lay ahead. Emily didn't care about fame or lights. She only hoped someone out there might need her song. And Daniel, torn between pride and fear, realized that for the first time in his life, he couldn't protect his daughter from everything. But he could walk beside her step by step into the unknown. In a town where nothing much ever changed, a blind girl and her father were about to rewrite their story, not for the world's applause, but to honor a voice that refused to stay hidden. The studio was a storm of movement, camera crews rushing past, with cords trailing behind them, assistants shouting names, contestants stretching, tuning guitars, or pacing nervously. The lights were blinding, even in the hallways, and the air smelled faintly of hairspray and electricity. In the middle of it all stood Emily Grace Carter, barely 4 feet tall, her hand tightly gripping her father's. Her white cane tapped cautiously on the tiled floor as they were led to the waiting area. Daniel walked slowly beside her, scanning every unfamiliar corner, his protective instincts flaring with every second. They passed by a group of contestants laughing and comparing outfits, teens in sparkly jackets and flawless makeup, rehearsing harmonies and checking their followers online. One girl stood out from the rest, tall with violet-dyed hair and silver eyeshadow. She watched Emily with a curious look before approaching. "You're the church girl, right?" she asked kindly. "I saw your video." Emily gave a polite nod. The girl smiled and added, "They always bring in one sweet kid to tug on the heartstrings. But if you sing like that again, you're not just the sweet kid. You'll shock them." Her name was Zoe, 15, and already seasoned in the competition world. Her words were the first kindness Emily had received that day. In the makeup room, Emily sat still in the chair while unfamiliar hands fussed around her. She listened to the whispers. "She's blind, right?" one stylist murmured. "Poor thing. Let's make her look sweet for the cameras." Another voice added, "They're gonna eat this up on TV." Emily said nothing. She had learned even at 8 that sometimes silence speaks louder than protest. Her hair was brushed into soft curls, a pale ribbon tied gently on top blush dabbed onto her cheeks. Perfect, someone whispered, not even to her, just to the image they had created. Backstage was even louder. Emily clutched the small notebook where she'd written the lyrics in braille, running her fingers across them again and again, like prayer beads. Around her footsteps thudded. Laughter echoed, but in her headphones there was only music. Somewhere over the rainbow, the song her father said her mother used to hum during pregnancy. Emily had never heard her voice, but somehow she felt the song still carried it.
She mouthed the words softly to herself, her tiny lips forming every note with care and quiet hope. Daniel sat beside her, his hand resting protectively on her back. He had never seen his daughter look more alone and never more brave. All he could do now was believe in her belief. He reached into his pocket and pulled out her sunshine bear, gently tucking it into her backpack. "Mum would be proud," he whispered, though his voice cracked. Emily didn't speak. She only smiled and nodded.
In her heart, she was already singing. And then a voice called from the hallway, "Emily Grace Carter, you're up next." Time stopped for a second. Emily stood. Her hand slipped into Daniel's one last time before she whispered, "I'm ready." The doors opened, the noise faded. All that was left was the sound of her small shoes tapping across the floor toward the stage, one step at a time into the unknown. The stage lights poured over the theater like molten gold. The host, dressed in a crisp navy suit, stood center stage with a microphone in hand. Next up, he announced, "We have the youngest contestant to ever grace this stage. She's just 8 years old and came all the way from North Carolina. Please welcome Emily Grace Carter." The audience clapped out of habit, a polite applause that held no real expectation. In the back, a few people even chuckled when they noticed the white cane, her tentative steps, her nervous expression. Emily walked carefully, counting steps like she had practiced. Her dress fluttered softly, and her ribbon caught the glow of the lights. She couldn't see the 200 faces watching, but she could feel their weight. The 3 judges sat ahead, celebrities known for their sharp critiques and showbiz charm. One leaned into the mic and asked with a professional tone, "And what will you be singing today?" "Emily." She held the microphone close and whispered, "A song I sing to my mommy in heaven." The crowd fell quiet. A hush blanketed the room. The piano began. Soft, dreamy notes filled the space. Emily took a breath and sang the first line. Her voice was fragile, almost uncertain, as if it were reaching out in the dark. But with each word, her tone grew stronger, layered with innocence and aching beauty. She wasn't performing. She was remembering. She wasn't impressing. She was sharing. Her voice became a story, each note a heartbeat of something real. One by one, conversations stopped. Even the backstage crew stood still. Parents reached for their children's hands. A woman in the 3rd row dabbed at her eyes. A teenage dancer backstage lowered her phone. Even Zoe, watching from the wing, held her breath. There was no auto-tune, no pyrotechnics, no fancy harmonies, just one child standing alone, daring the world to listen. The cameras zoomed in, catching every rise and fall in her voice, every subtle tremble that made it even more human. The auditorium, designed for volume and reaction, was filled only with stillness and song. The judges didn't move. One rested his chin on his fist eyes, unreadable. Another had her hand over her heart. The third leaned forward, as if trying to get closer to a sound that didn't seem possible. Emily continued, every word soaked in emotion, her small hands gripping the microphone with all the strength her little body could summon. She was not just singing for her mother. She was singing from her mother. The echo of that love rang louder than any orchestra. And when she reached the final note, "Why, oh, why can't I?" the piano faded into silence. Emily stood alone in the spotlight, breathing gently, head tilted slightly toward the sky. For a long moment, no one clapped. No one even exhaled. The air was too full of something else, something sacred, something no one expected. The silence spoke louder than thunder, and then, like a wave breaking all at once, the room erupted. Applause surged through the theater, rising into cheers, whistles, and even tears. One by one, the audience stood up. The woman who had cried in the 3rd row now clapped with both hands over her head. A man in the balcony whispered something to his daughter, who hugged him tightly. The judges rose from their seats, too, with tears, one just shaking his head in disbelief. A moment meant to be emotional filler had turned into something unforgettable. The judge, who rarely praised anyone, took the microphone. "Emily," he said, his voice almost reverent, "you reminded us tonight that music is not about power, it's about heart. and yours is enormous. The host visibly moved, walked back to the stage and took her hand. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, tonight we weren't just entertained, we were reminded. The cameras panned across the crowd, smiles, tears, awe. And in the chaos, Emily stood still, clutching her microphone, not fully understanding what she had done, but feeling deep in her bones that something important had shifted. Backstage, Zoe ran up to her and threw her arms around her in a big sister's embrace. "You did it," she whispered. "You didn't sing for the show. You sang for the stars. And they heard you." Daniel stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, trying to keep his emotions in check. He had seen his daughter be born, had held her through fevers and nightmares, but he had never seen her quite like this, unshaken, glowing, and heard. The next morning, sunlight spilled into their modest hotel room overlooking a sliver of downtown LA. Emily sat curled up on the couch, a cup of warm milk in her hand. Daniel sipped his coffee quietly as the phone buzzed non-stop. Her performance had gone viral. 10 million views in 10 hours. Headlines read, "The Voice of Purity." Blind girl's song silences the world. Emily didn't care about the numbers, but when she heard a comment read aloud, she made me call my mum just to say I love her. She smiled softly. That mattered. Later that day, Ryan Matthews knocked on the door with a bouquet of tulips and a hesitant smile. "We thought we were creating a moment," he admitted, "but you gave us a miracle." He placed a small envelope on the table. Inside were letters from 3 record labels and an offer to return for the finals. Emily reached out and felt the texture of the envelope. "I just wanted someone to hear me," she said. "I think they did." Ryan nodded, speechless for once. And Daniel. He simply looked at his daughter, the light of the morning, catching her soft curls, and whispered, "You gave the world your voice, Em, and it gave you everything back." That afternoon, just before they were set to leave the hotel, the front desk called up with a small envelope addressed to Emily. It was written in Braille. Daniel helped guide her fingers to the dots, and Emily's small hands moved slowly over the raised bumps, translating a message she couldn't yet emotionally comprehend. The letter was short, but the words were weighty. It read, "Many years ago, I told a young woman that she lacked artistry. I believed music was technique and control. I was wrong. Watching you reminded me that true music is truth, vulnerability, and soul. You are what music truly is." It was signed James Winters. Daniel froze when he saw the name. He remembered it clearly. Emily's mother had spoken once about Professor Winters, a man who had crushed her dreams of becoming a singer long before Emily was even born. For a moment, the hotel room was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Emily tilted her head, sensing her father's breath hitch. She didn't know who the man was, nor the history that lived inside that apology. But Daniel knew. He wiped his eyes quickly, turning toward the window so Emily wouldn't see. Outside, the sun dipped low across the Los Angeles skyline, casting golden light across the horizon, as if the city itself were bowing in gratitude. Daniel placed the letter gently in Emily's bag right next to her notebook and Sunshine Bear. There were no grand speeches, no dramatic conclusions, only a quiet acknowledgement between a father and daughter that something had been healed. Not just in the world, but in the timeline of their own family's story. Later that evening, as their plane rose above the clouds, Emily sat with her head resting on Daniel's shoulder. She wasn't nervous this time. She wasn't afraid of the next thing. She simply hummed softly, steadily, something between Somewhere Over the Rainbow and a new melody of her own. It wasn't for the cameras or the crowd, it was just for the sky, and it came from a place inside her that had nothing to prove anymore. Daniel looked at her with awe. She may not have seen the spotlight with her eyes, but she had stepped into it completely, with grace, with courage, and with something the world had forgotten to value: sincerity. He realized for the first time that his daughter didn't need to change who she was to belong. The spotlight had found her exactly as she was, pure, unfiltered, and unshakably real. As the plane sliced through the sky, Emily whispered, "Do you think Mommy heard me?" Daniel closed his eyes. smiled through the tears, and answered, "I think she heard every word." Emily nodded her fingers, playing an invisible keyboard on the tray before her. She didn't know where life would lead next, but she knew now that her voice, no matter how small, had the power to move hearts, to open doors, and to make people believe again. And that perhaps was the truest music of all. So, if Emily Grace Carter's story moved you even just a little, please take a moment to subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to believe again. Not just in music, but in themselves. Because sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones no one sees coming. And sometimes the smallest note can echo the loudest when it's sung with truth. We tell stories like Emily's not just to entertain, but to remind you that your story isn't over either. Whether you're 8 or 80, blind or broken, unheard or underestimated, your voice matters, and the world needs it more than ever. Thank you for watching and walking with us through this journey of light, courage, and music. We'll see you again soon right here, where every story begins with the heart and ends with hope. This is Deep Inside HQ. Stay human, stay brave, and keep listening.